Hello everyone, welcome to this lecture. In this lecture I'll be answering someone's question about modeling a reboiler externally. Right, so somebody asked a question about the modeling of a reboiler externally, so I'll try to answer it in this particular tutorial. So you are welcome to this tutorial. Now, for distillation column modeling, right, there is a section in the distillation column that is called solver, right? It's called solver, and there are many methods that can be used in solving your distillation column. So we'll be taking a look at an already simulated process, right? So this is a distillation column right here. Right now, if you open it and you go to parameters, right? In parameters you have solver, right? Now this solver has a couple of methods for solving distillation columns, and depending on the one you choose, right, that will determine how that particular distillation column will be configured, right? So but the default is the Hysys inside out, right? And this Hysys inside out does not really permit you to make changes to the distillation column externally, right? So you cannot have external configuration for your distillation column with the Hysys inside out. What that means is all your specifications, right, must be made inside the column, right? So when you create the column, you have to design it completely from inside, right? So even if you want to add specifications, you have to add those specifications inside the column, right? So that's what happens when you use the Hysys inside out, and this Hysys inside out is the default, right? So if you want to model a distillation column and you bring it out from your palette, right, it will automatically be in Hysys inside out, right? But if you want to now use another model, you can now change it to whichever model you want to use, right? So these models have different configurations, right? Different configurations, and that is what I have over here. Let's see. So this is it, right? So these are the different solver methods and what they can do. So the default is the Hysys inside out, right? It says general purpose method, which is good for most problems. Then you have the modified Hysys inside out, which says general purpose method, which allows mixer T and heat exchangers inside the column subflow sheet, right? So you have the Newton-Raphson inside out, you have the sparse continuation solver, you have the simultaneous correction, and then the OLI solver. So each of them have what they do and how they function, right? So you can pause the video and probably look at the explanation properly for each of them, right? So now, from what I've seen from all these solver methods, I think the one that is likely to solve that particular problem is this one, the modified Hysys inside out, because it lets you it gives you the opportunity to make adjustments to the subflow sheet environment, right? So here you can actually replace the reboiler with a heat exchanger, right? Because you are given the opportunity to make changes, right? So we'll be trying out this particular problem with this modified Hysys inside out. Also, they have their features, right? All the solver methods, all of them, the Hysys IO, the inside out, modified, Newton-Raphson, sparse, simultaneous, and OLI, they have their features here, so you can also take a look at that, right? So IO has all this. It has component efficiency, total efficiency, side draw, vapor bypass, pump around, side strippers, side rectifier, mixer anti in subflow sheet, yes. 3-phase, yes, but it doesn't have the chemical, so you see no, right? So depending on what you want to model, you may want to check this out, right, to check which of them is the most suitable for your model, your distillation column model, right? So you look at this before you choose the method you want to use, right? So we'll be making use of the modified Hysys inside out because it gives you the opportunity to make modifications in the subflow sheet, right? So going back to the model, this is the model that we have, right? Now, to access your subflow sheet, you can use two methods. Either you click on the equipment and then you click on enter subflow sheet environment. I can exit this, right? Or let's go back to parent, or you can click on it, double click on it. When it's open, then you click on column environment, right? So either one works for it. So in the subflow sheet environment, you have a smaller model palette here that you can use for your minor adjustments of the subflow sheet. So this is your subflow sheet environment, right? Now this subflow sheet is created because not all parts of the distillation column can be represented in the main flow sheet, right? Because the main flow sheet is a combination of all the equipment in the process, right? So this subflow sheet gives you more detail about that particular equipment, right? But you will note that not all equipment have subflow sheet, right? Not all of them, but at least I'm sure the distillation column has subflow sheet. Then the I think Aspen Hydraulics has subflow sheet as well. So not all equipment, but a few of them have subflow sheet, right? So this distillation column is an example of an equipment that has subflow sheet, right? So this is the subflow sheet of the distillation column. Now here you have, adjust it a little, you have your main tower, which is your distillation column. Then you have your condenser, right? You have your condenser, the inlet and the outlet, the reflux and everything. Then you have your reboiler as well, right? So these are some things you may not find in the main flow sheet, right? And this is done so that the main flow sheet will not be too choked with a lot of equipment and representation. That is why they created a subflow sheet to properly represent some of these specific equipment, right? Like the distillation column, right? So in this particular tutorial, we are going to be replacing this reboiler with a heat exchanger, right? And to do that, we are going to make use of the Hysys modified, right? That's what we'll be making use of. So we go back to the parent environment. This is the parent environment. Then we go to solver, right? And then we change it to modified Hysys inside out, right? So once you change it, so once the solver method is changed, you notice that the column becomes unconverged, right? So we have to make adjustments. Then we run the column once again, right? So we are going to try to solve this right here. We are going to solve this. We are replacing the reboiler with a heat exchanger, and then we have the following conditions as well, right? Before the feed enters the heat exchanger, it's going to be pumped a little, then sent to the heat exchanger. Then from the heat exchanger, the tube outlet will be sent into a two-phase separator. The bottom of the two-phase separator is the bottom outlet of the distillation column, while the top of the separator is the recycle back into the distillation column. So we'll try to model that and then try to see if the distillation column will converge, right? So we now go back to the column environment. Right, now in the column environment, we will be making some changes. First, we delete the energy stream. We are going to be deleting the energy stream. Let me see. Can we delete it from here? Yes, we can delete it from here. So we delete the energy stream. Then also we delete the reboiler. Delete. Yes. Delete the reboiler also. Right. So now at this point we'll be making our changes. So we are going to be adding a pump, right? The pump. Then we need an outlet for the pump. P out. Then also we need our heat exchanger as well, right? So the heat exchanger is going to replace the reboiler, right? So you notice that here in this subflowsheet environment, in your equipment palette, you have your condenser and then your reboiler, right? In case you want to make use of them, but you can't have them in the palette of the main flow sheet, right? So we are making use of a heat exchanger for this, right? So I can change icon, right? Then we now need our shell inlet and outlet for the reboiler, for the heat exchanger, then as well the tube outlet. Then also we need a two-phase separator, right? A two-phase separator. So this two-phase separator, the inlet will be the tube outlet of the heat exchanger. Then the boil up, right? The boil up, which is the recycle back to the distillation column, is the top of this two-phase separator, right? The bottom is the bottom of the distillation column, while the top is the recycle back to the distillation column, right? So be mindful of this bottom outlet because it is also in the main flow sheet, right? Then we can specify the inlet of this guy, which is this. Then we need an energy stream. We can specify that as well, right? What else do we need? Okay, from the problem statement, we have our pressure drop, pump pressure drop, which is 75. You can specify that from the parameters, 75 kPa. Okay, then what else? We have specified that. Let me see. Let's go to this. Let's specify this as well. So the tube inlet is this, then the tube outlet is, let me use this, right? What else? We need shell in and shell out. So we are specifying the shell inlet and the shell outlet streams, right? Sorry, shell out. Right, so we now have pressure drop to specify as well. Okay. Let me specify the shell inlet first. The shell inlet conditions from the problem. The shell inlet conditions is flow rate 2500 kg per hour and then 200 degrees Celsius, and it contains only steam. So I can easily specify that so 200 degrees Celsius, right? And it's steam at 200 degrees Celsius. That is superheated steam. So the vapor pressure, the vapor fraction is 1. Then what else do we have? 2500 kg per hour. 2500 kg per hour, right? Then what else? The composition is steam, so the composition of water will be 1. Okay, so we have to add water to this, right? We go to the properties environment and we add water to our component list. Okay, so we need water because we are now making use of a heat exchanger. So we just add water to the list and go back to the simulation environment. No. Okay, now we are back. We can now specify composition of the shell inlet. We have water as 1. Okay, right, so this has solved. The shell inlet has solved. So now we need to specify the pressure drop, the shell and tube, the tube side and the shell side pressure drop. That is what we are going to specify next. So for the shell side, we'll be making use of a pressure drop of 75 kPa. Then for the tube side, make use of a pressure drop of 50 kPa, right? So once you are done specifying all of this, you can go back to the main flow sheet, right? The main flow sheet to run the column, right? Once you run the column and it converges, all of this in the subflow sheet would solve, right? Okay, so before we go there, we are specifying our feed stream for the two-phase separator, right? For the two-phase separator, let me see, I want to raise this up a little so that I can have some space down there, right? Let me see how it looks. Yeah, it looks okay. So I can raise this up also. Raise this. Let me see if I can take these guys up. Yes. Okay, so the inlet to the two-phase separator is the tube outlet, right? So that is it. The tube outlet is the inlet to the two-phase separator. So this is what we have. This is what we have. Let's reduce the size of the column. Okay, I can also do this so that it can look better. Yes, so we are okay now. Everything is fully specified. All that is left is to run the column. So you click on go to parent, right? So we are in the parent environment. Then you reset and you run, right? So I just click on reset. And then I click on run. Okay, let me check what other spec is required. Okay, now from the monitor environment, trying to run this doesn't work, right? As we deleted the reboiler, the spec of the reboiler also got deleted from the monitor section, right? The spec of the reboiler also got deleted, right? Because initially we had a spec for the reboiler which was rate vapor pressure, right? So we now have to make that specification again and attach it to this heat exchanger, right? So initially it was rate vapor pressure for the reboiler. But now that we have changed the reboiler to a heat exchanger, we have to add that spec back and use the heat exchanger as the equipment instead, right? So we will just be doing that quickly. That is vapor pressure spec, add spec. So we have is the type is rate vapor pressure, then the stage is, the stage will be V100, right? V100 is the what do you call it now, is the two-phase separator, right? That is, it will be serving as the drum of the reboiler, right? The heat exchanger is where the heat exchange takes place, while the containment, right, is the two-phase separator, right? So the two-phase separator would be the stage where this spec is going to be working from. Then the spec value is 200 psi, 200 psi, right? So we are good with that. Then we can exit. Then we can now we will also activate heat balance, right? So that our degree of freedom can be 0. So you just activate that. So after we specify the vapor pressure and then the degree of freedom is 0, we can now run the column, right? And the column has converged, right? So we can go back to the column environment to check the structure of the column, the configuration. Just click on column environment and it takes you there. So this is what you have now. So we have successfully replaced the reboiler with a heat exchanger, right? So once you run the column, the subflow sheet would also solve, right? So it won't solve until you run the column. So once you make your adjustments inside the subflow sheet, you have to go back to the main flow sheet, right? You have to go back to the main flow sheet environment here and check your specs to ensure that the degree of freedom is 0. If it's not 0, you have to make adjustments to your specs, then activate the specs that were specified, the specs with values, then you run your column again, right? After you have made those adjustments, right? Then your subflow sheet environment would solve as well, right? So that is how to make adjustments to your distillation column and then model your reboiler externally, right? So if you want to model externally, you go to parameters and you change your solver option, right? So it's your solver option that gives you the opportunity to model your reboiler externally, right? So that's it. That's how this particular scenario works out, right? So that's how it works out. So I hope I have been able to answer that particular question that was asked. So if you still have more questions on this relating to this, you can still ask. Drop your comments and observations in the comment section. Like this video, share it with your friends, then subscribe to this channel and the main channel as well if you have not done so, for future notifications on tutorials, right, that relate to process simulation, right? Thank you for joining me. Do have a good day.